Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast, where you get your daily fill of seizing, pouncing, grasping, and who knows what else. And you're just seeing right there the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, and the Swami of Seizing, Andrew Malcolm at Malcolm on Twitter, the Swami of Seizing. I see. Maybe I should be the Swami of Seizing. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll be the president of Pouncing. Yeah.
There you go, the president of Pouncing. Of course, the reason why I'm talking about this is that over the weekend, accountability landed at the University of Pennsylvania, kind of to my mild surprise. I was predicting it would happen, because when your $100 million donor says "screw you," it tends to get people's attentions, even in academia. And Liz McGill, the erstwhile president of Penn, tendered her resignation voluntarily, apparently on the second or third try. And they're going to be looking for another president, although she's still running the place in the interim, and she'll be there because she's also a tenured member of faculty in the law school, so she's going to stick around. But a lot of accountability over at Penn, not so much at Harvard or MIT, the other two presidents that made fools of themselves last week. Andrew, when they testified Congress. And we didn't talk about this last week because the testimony was the day after we recorded the podcast last week.
Yeah. What a show.
I mean, first off, let's talk just a little bit about that. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like that. The hubris and the sort of sneering contempt that these three had for the members of Congress who were questioning them on this, and getting things really morally completely backwards while doing so. And I bet you that they left that hearing thinking that we really showed those guys.
Yeah. Well, that's talk about the hubris. That's the arrogance that I think a lot of people associate with New England and with the Ivy League. And, it's not always appropriate, but it sure did come out there that, we're pretty special, and you people need to understand and appreciate it. And respect is earned; it's not demanded, and you can't demand it. And that's what they were, and making fools of them. This is the what's the word? The dissonance in the whole woke movement is that they can't believe there's another way of thinking, and if there is, it's really petty and small time. But maybe there's beginning to be a pushback, and we can hope that the woke movement that's so determined to squash American exceptionalism will fade over time.
Well, I mean, that's a whole other area of academia that's an issue here. But in this particular case, I mean, there are people who are still defending these guys on the basis of free speech. In fact, John Sexton, as we're speaking, just posted a warning to people saying, if this type of thing is going to lead to more speech restrictions, not to freer speech on campus. And look, I mean, I actually think it's a pretty smart piece, and people should read it. I don't necessarily agree with John on this, but it's still a pretty smart piece. And that's the difference between hot air and academia, which is that you can have two different points of view without me screaming about safe spaces and shutting, John Sexton down. I mean, I'm managing editor, and he's kind of disagreeing with me here. And if I was as touchy as these three moral idiots were, not only would I have tubed that post, I would have probably suspended John for a week until he wrote a one of those Mao-esque "all the ways I have failed the revolutions."
Well, this reminds me of the New York Times kerfluffle. Well, it was more than a kerfluffle; it was disaster when they published that Tom Cannon piece using using the military to quell the urban uprisings, and the old space between editorial and the news people got quashed. The news people rose up and said their lives were being endangered, and the Times caved. It was the old publisher, the one I worked for, Punch Salzberger, wouldn't have allowed that, and I don't think his son would have either, though he was pretty woke. But the grandson, he just caved, and it's a shame. It's what they do in that region, where they hire people that think like them from the same universities. I was unusual in that I came from a Midwestern university, and that may be why I'm not there anymore. I don't know, but but there is a way of thinking. When I left the New York Times in '93, one of my colleagues said, "Well, who's the Democrat you're going to work for?" And I said, "Well, it isn't. It's the new Republican governor in Montana." And she was shocked. It's just it's groupthink, and I guess it's enforced now. Although back then it was just sort of assumed that everybody had the same ultra liberal values.
Yeah, and again, I think this is why I'm going to get right back to the New York Times, right? Because that's part of this story this week too, which is that McGill resigned on late Saturday afternoon or early Saturday evening because the board was going to hold an emergency meeting on Sunday. And Victoria Coates, I was tweeting about it earlier on Saturday, and because I'd written something about it. I said, look, first off, they met on Thursday, and apparently reportedly somebody went to McGill and said it's time to step down, and she must have said no because they scheduled another emergency meeting, at which point it was going to become clear that if she wasn't stepping down, they were basically going to walk her off the plank themselves, right? And Victoria Coates on Twitter said, yeah, and if you think that it's a normal thing for Penn's board to meet on a Sunday, especially when there's an Eagles-Cowboys game scheduled, think again. And so, yeah, I mean, I think even McGill realized that the end was nigh, and it was better to transition out of the job rather than to just get unceremoniously dumped, which is what it looked like was going to happen. And then,
people make a difference out of that. It seems the same to me. She was forced out.
Yeah, she was forced out, but and then the chair of the board of trustees resigned as well. So apparently he was a little crosswise with the board on this issue. But at any rate, after this, the New York Times, after all of this, decides that the real story is, come on, Andrew, you can finish this.
You go ahead. You do it so well. And then I'll pounce after.
It was the seizing Republicans. Republicans were seizing on the moment to force changes in higher education after being antagonistic towards it for decades. And it's like, when you've got anti-Semites trying to chase Jews off of campuses, maybe there's not a lot of pouncing or seizing going on here. Maybe somebody needs to take, this into account and deal with it. And I mean, the story is always the Republicans, right? It's never Democrats screwing up. It's never progressives screwing up. It's Republicans reacting to Democrats and progressive screw-ups. That's the story.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pathetic. And it comes from that culture thinks it's so smart. It comes from looking down their nose at everybody else, and sometimes there's something under their nose that they can't see, and they get spanked just like this piece.
It's the same culture. That's the problem,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's the same culture that's producing, the editors of mainstream media outlets like the New York
exactly,
Times.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
So
and they reinforce each other. For years I've told the joke about uh, which drives some members of my family berserk, but they're not listening. So it's about a, a Boston restaurant, and there's a family eating there, and then next to them is an elderly couple, and the woman in the couple leans over and says, "Excuse me, where I detect an accent. Where are you people from?" And the other wife says, "Well, we're from Iowa." And the elderly woman says, "Oh, well, in Boston, we pronounce it Ohio." And that's the same. They used to make a joke that there was nothing in the New York Times that they couldn't, anything that happened west of the Hudson River uh, was a waste of time. Now
yeah.
that's not true, and it wasn't true. I spent a lot of my career as a national correspondent, wandering all over the country for the Times. Sometimes you felt like you were a foreign correspondent explaining Nebraska
Yeah.
to New Englanders. The New York Times is much more national now. It had to be because their readership was dying off and moving away. But I remember during Watergate, the national desk said they wanted me to go and write, a small town reacts to this is before he resigned, to the Nixon scandal. And I said, okay, well, what do you want it to be? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you want it to be supporting Nixon, I'll go to Nebraska. If you want it to be against Nixon, I'll go to Wisconsin. They were shocked. So I went to Hastings, Nebraska, and sure enough, they were supporting Nixon.
You
I,
just you
I
grasp
hate those. It wasn't I wasn't in the street, but it's like man in the street where you talk to all different kinds of people and you get certain quotes and you get a sense. I'm not saying that it's precise, but you get a sense for how people are thinking in a place. It's the same thing you do when you're covering elections before the election.
right.
You
Well,
get
look, I mean,
you get a feeling for momentum. Yeah,
well, you can either talk polls or you can talk anecdotes, right? And the
yeah.
polls aren't necessarily all that reliable either.
No, no, they've screwed up a lot.
They've
They've
screwed up
screwed
a
up a lot,
lot.
but that's all there is, and I've been in the position that where the mainstream media is, where there's an election going on. They've determined it's important. I don't know if it's important this far out, but that's all they got. And the only thing that's happening is the polls. And so they seize on the polls and make it into a horse race. Oh, she's up this week. He's down. He's been down since the spring. And of course, none of it matters because those polls are a moment in time. And by the time they write the story from last Thursday's poll, it's changed. The
Right.
Pew Research, after, was it 2016 or 2020? I forget which one, but after the presidential election, one of them with Trump, they Pew Research did a national poll, and they found that during the primary process, Republicans, almost every single Republican changed their mind at some point. Most of them at least twice, many three times, and a sizable number, four times, changed their mind about who they were going to vote for. So it's a very fluid thing. Doesn't show up in the polls. The national polls um, are, in my mind, you're the poll guy, but in my mind, they don't
Yeah.
matter at all right now because we're 11 months away. And what's important now are a handful of unrepresentative, tiny irrelevant states like Iowa and New Hampshire, who are all full of themselves at the moment because their moment in the sun is coming. But you you can do a poll, I guess, in Iowa, and Trump's supposed to be ahead, and there's movement there. But national polls, they don't mean anything. It's just the desperation of media to have something new. I get it. I've been in that position, but I think they need to be a little more honest and truthful about what they're doing. And every time they mention a poll, they mention that it's a snapshot and a moment in time, and it's the only way we have to measure, and so on. But people think, oh, he's coming on, he's pulling away.
Yeah,
No.
there's a couple things about this too, and I think that there's one particular aspect of polling that people are not cognizant of, which is, I mean, you mentioned a couple of factors which people should always keep in mind: snapshot in time, sample size matters, and I mean, this is when you're doing polls honestly. I mean, there are plenty of honest pollsters out there.
Registered versus likely.
Registered versus likely is another one, right? But another thing that doesn't get a lot of attention, and it's hard to find in the data, because not a lot of pollsters include it, was what percentage of people who you approached actually answered the poll.
Mm.
And somebody raised this, and I mean, it's something I'm aware of, right, in terms of reliability. But somebody raised this, and they say, you take a look at some of these polls, and if you drill down far enough, you'll see that the response percentage is really around 3, 4, 5%, which means that they have to do a lot of effort to get enough. They got to ask a lot more people in order to get, the requisite sample size. So they're, working overtime to do that. And if you're only getting a 4 or 5% response rate on questions, and this person used 90%, which I think is way too high. But I mean, if you're looking for a true random sample, you really should be somewhere around the 40, 50%, acceptance rate level, somewhere north of 10% at least. And the problem is that you're drilling down into a narrower and narrow number of people who are actually willing to answer these things. And that means
and possibly dishonestly.
right. That's exactly my point. Is that the only people now who are willing to answer these polls, it may not even be dishonest, but they may be answering it because out of their own motives, right? I really want to show that these pollsters are, I really want to make sure that people know that my guy is out in front, sort of thing, rather than just a random, oh, well, this is what I'm thinking at the moment type of thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the polls are wrong. And, I'll put it in the context of the Des Moines Register poll, which they do now in combination with NBC in Iowa, which is a state poll. It's not a national poll. And the DMR poll is usually considered the gold standard of Iowa polling, but they've been off the last couple of cycles as well. And especially when you're dealing with caucusing, because caucusing is a big change from just showing up to vote. I mean, you have to want to get out of your house in the middle of the winter.
And you
to
want to have to want to stick around for 6 hours. And when your guy gets eliminated, that you have a second choice. And I mean, it's just, and by the way, George W. Bush won Iowa and then he won the election. But come on, does anybody remember President Huckabee or President Santorum?
President Gephardt?
Yeah, Gephardt. Yeah.
President Gephardt. I remember the Gephardt presidency well. It lasted, I don't know, a week.
Yeah. And so that's what I meant by these unrepresentative states.
Yeah.
It's a cockamamie primary system. And people, it came in because people thought, oh, smoke-filled rooms and, oh, that's bad. Well, and on the polling, I'm especially in 2020, I'm not sure that people were honest. They didn't want any even though they're anonymous, I didn't want any pushback. And so they said they were for Trump when they either weren't or they were afraid to say they were Trump for Trump. So you can't. The media puts far too much reliance on it, and people, I'm afraid, readers who are inattentive, they dip in now and then and they look and they say, oh, this poll, he must be coming on strong. But there's so many variables that and bad records that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's at 32 points in that DMR poll, by the way. So I'm not suggesting that there's some sort of, that we're talking about a margin of error difference here. But what I am suggesting is that maybe they're only talking to the people who are understandably wanting to discuss this at all. It would not surprise me if Trump still won the Iowa caucus. But it also wouldn't surprise me if the person who's been doing a lot more ground organization ended up winning it, despite what the polls are saying. Because again, polls are just talking to people on the phone. Caucuses, you have to actually get up on a certain day at a certain hour, get your butt into the room, into a 6-hour meeting, possibly 6-hour meeting.
Cold January night.
Yeah, ever been in Iowa in January? I've been in Iowa in January, been in Minnesota for quite a few Januaries. You don't want to go out of the house on a January night in Iowa. You just don't. So I am skeptical of that poll. I'm not skeptical of the poll. I'm skeptical of the predictive nature of that poll, and I'm skeptical that they've got a response rate on that would make that a reliably predictive survey. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's rigged. I'm not saying it's cooked. I'm just saying that when you only have 4 or 5% of a population willing to answer those questions, the data that comes out of that is probably not going to be reliable. And I think we're going to see more of that. I don't know about you, but
like you said, I don't think many people realize that.
No, I don't think they do. By the way, here's a hint. If you're getting a phone call from the 512 area code and you don't want to answer a poll, don't answer the phone, because that's where they're all calling from. I don't know why. Everything from 512 is a pollster, and I've just learned not to answer the phone. And part of the reason is not because I don't want to share my opinion. I do that every damn day. But because once they find out that you're in the media, they won't take your information anyway. They'll ask what you do for a living. Oh, well, I work in the media. Well, how do you work in the media? Well, I write about politics. Oh, well, sorry, we can't use you.
Yeah.
And I've just wasted everybody's time. So yeah, I just don't even
bother. The only
bother.
poll I've ever been called for was on movie titles. They were this is years and years ago, but they were testing movie titles. And would I go and see a movie named such and such?
I wonder what movie. I mean, I'm sure you don't remember what the specifics.
No, I remember one of them. It was the one with arachnophobia.
Oh,
yeah, it was all about spiders and eating people and stuff. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, well, there was a movie called Arachnophobia, and it's actually pretty good. Creep me the hell out though. But it was also pretty funny. I mean, it had some humor to it and everything else. But it creeped me the hell out.
Yeah.
Arachnophobia wasn't bad. All right. Well, I want to get to your columns here this week, especially your Malcolm on the Right, which was from Thursday. I hate this Christmas song, and unless you actually look at the graphic that Andrew chose, it might be a mystery to you as to which Christmas song that Andrew actually hates, because there are a number of them that could fall into that category. But you hate Little Drummer Boy?
I do. I absolutely despise it. My teeth grit every time I hear it. And this is my third year that I've been successfully gone through a holiday season without hearing it. And some of my Twitter people had tried to trick me last year where they said, oh, Andrew, you should read this story. And they sent me a link, and the link goes to Little Drummer Boy on YouTube or something. And I say,
get Rickrolled.
Yeah,
you got drummer rolled.
Yeah. No, I caught it before it played a single note. It's just the most cloying thing, and I hate that parumpa pum pum thing. So I thought, well, I'll have some fun because everybody's happy. They're supposed to be happy and cheerful at Christmas and the holiday season, and so I'll be a little grumpy. I'll be Andy Rooney for a day.
Andy Rooney. I don't know what it is about Christmas music. And it's funny because I was just defending a Christmas song today. I probably would have defended Little Drummer Boy, by the way, which is maybe not one of my favorite ones, but it's by far and away not one of the ones that I detest. And people really hate Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas Is You."
I don't understand it. I love the rhythm. I love the bounciness of it.
It's a great song.
Yeah.
There is this, and what really makes it, first off, is Mariah Carey is just a terrific singer, right? It's well written. It's beautifully produced. It's got kind of like a Phil Spector-ish Wall of Sound aspect to it. But what it has is it's got a great hook. It's got a great hook. It's got this descending bass line through the refrain that repeats. It takes place twice. Da, 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 and then it has this great resolution at the end. I mean, that is pop music perfection right there. And I mean, I know people tend to denigrate pop music, but pop music's a really good art form when it's done well.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are about Christmas. It's about love at Christmas time. And it's not commercial.
Happy. Yeah.
It's happy. It's not selling products. All I want for Christmas is, a Schwinn bike or something like that. I mean, that would be objectionable. It's really a great Christmas song.
Or is it a daisy rifle? No, you'll shoot your eye out.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid. I mean, and that's a great Christmas movie, by the way. A Christmas movie.
It's a wonderful movie. It's a wonderful movie. I saw a little clip of Bruce Willis the other day. I understand he's not well, but this is from before. He was at a roast, and he said the only reason he came to the roast was to make perfectly clear that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. And I disagree with him, but
a Christmas movie is a Christmas movie. I mean, very clearly it's a Christmas movie. And the follow-up is actually really good. The one that they just did a couple of years ago with most of the original cast. Melinda Dillon couldn't come back. It's called A Christmas Movie Christmas. And it's
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's really good. If you get a chance, you should watch it. I wrote a review of it. I think it was last year or the year before last that it came out. It's really touching. It's really, really done well. Melinda Dillon didn't participate in it as the mother, so they got Julie Haggerty to do it from Airplane. And she was very, very good in the role. And it's all about Ralphie. His father's passed away, and he's making the funeral arrangements, and it occurs to him that his father was the one that made Christmas magical, and now it was going to be up to him to do it for the family. And it's really touching. I would highly recommend that to anybody who, especially the people
and Ralphie was in it, right? I mean, Ralphie was
Peter Billingsley. Yeah, Peter Billingsley was the original Ralphie. He plays Ralphie in this. The actor who plays his little brother came out of retirement to do that role again. The actors who were his friends in school, they're back to that. It's
Farkas.
Scott Farkas shows up.
Yeah.
Scott Farkas shows up, and it's actually a pretty cool little cameo by the guy who played Scott Farkas. And so yeah. I mean, I
saw a video the other day of a woman in front of a restaurant, and she said, "Well, I'm in front of this restaurant, and I ran into somebody very familiar." And right on that cue, he leans over her shoulder and says, "Hey, how you doing?" And it's Biff from Back to the Future.
He's a pretty cool guy too.
He's got a restaurant.
He's a pretty cool guy too. I enjoyed him. He was he actually showed up. I mean, he's done some pretty good work in other stuff too. And he was actually in the Melissa McCarthy, Sandra Bullock movie called The Heat, where there are two cops. She's Sandra Bullock is an FBI agent, and Melissa McCarthy is a Boston police officer.
I like that movie. I didn't realize he was in it.
He was the captain. He was the captain, and the one that Melissa McCarthy is just ragging on all the time. And he tells Sandra Bullock, he says, "How old do you think I am?" She goes, "I don't know, 58. He goes, "I'm 43. He says, "My 5-year-old son calls me grandpa." He's really, and I've heard him interviewed. He's actually a pretty funny guy when he's doing interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But at any rate, back to Christmas music. I gotta unload on the Christmas song that I can't stand, and there's a
Okay.
couple,
All right. All right. The mystery is about to be revealed.
which is what's the one by Wham? Oh gosh, not Wonderful Christmas Time. I don't like that one either. That's the Paul McCartney one, but um, Last Christmas. That's what it is. Last Christmas. Can't stand. Yeah, last Christmas I gave you my heart. Threw it away the very next. I don't know. It's
Isn't it funny how certain kinds of music tune into your brain? You
tuned
know,
into
there's
your last nerve.
there's a classical music, and I just realized not long ago that my parents must have exposed me to it early on. But there's a Ketchachurian movie, and it's a saber dance, and it's that. Well,
Oh yeah,
whenever,
yeah, yeah. I know that. I
yeah,
know that
yeah,
music. Yeah.
and I guess he got in trouble with Stalin, but he, but the song, I knew it, and I knew it as a little kid because whenever I wanted to get out of drying dishes, and this will show you how long ago it was because we didn't have a dishwasher, I would do that song. I would do that music that while I was drying it, and just the hectic pace of the music drove my mother crazy. She was afraid I was going to drop the dish. I mean, I wasn't doing it fast. I was just doing music fast. And she would say, "All right, just leave it. I'll do it." And I go, "Okay, fine."
Yeah.
I guess you had to
You
be
know what
there.
ever you know what I remember that music from? Because it was I don't think it was Ed Sullivan, because I think I was a little too young to remember anything from the Ed Sullivan show, but I remember remember those guys that used to twirl the dishes on
Yes, yes,
oh,
on pool poles. Yeah,
yeah. There was a variety show where
yes,
you would see that from time, and that was the piece of music they always used.
yes, yes. That's right. That's right.
Yes.
That's a, oh, what a memory. I remember. I remember. Remember. I forgot his name now. Doctor Wences. Doctor
Oh,
Wences.
Senior Wences. Senior Wences.
Senior Wences with the
Yeah.
head in the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little Johnny, and and he had the head in the box. He's always over. He says, "Okay, it's all right."
It's all right.
Anyways,
It's okay. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. It's okay. Oh my gosh.
yeah. And
Yeah,
the other
well,
one was it's the guy that made no sense. He's gone now, but Professor Corey. Oh,
I thought you were talking about Joe Biden.
yeah. Well, you could do that. I mean, the sentences were all formed and everything, but when you listen to the words, you're right. It's Joe Biden. It makes no sense whatsoever. Whenever they introduced him, uh, Professor Corey, I think it's Professor Corey. Anyway, whenever they introduced him, he would come on the stage and the camera would be on him, and he would say, "However." That's the way he started his act all the time. He hadn't said anything, and he's contradicting it. Anyway, I guess she had to be there for that too. But there's some funny stuff, and it doesn't involve swearing.
Exactly. Exactly. It doesn't involve Little Drummer Boys
Oh,
or Last Christmas or Wonderful Christmas Time or Do They Know It's Christmas at All, which is another one I can't stand.
oh
Um,
yeah. I could have done that one too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but the thing in the post that I had fun with was imagining what it would be like. First of all, Mary rode on a donkey all day, very pregnant. Then she has the baby in the barn, and she's in the barn. It doesn't smell good. It's not clean because she told Joseph, make a reservation. And he said, no, it's okay. It's okay. December 25th isn't a holiday yet. and there will be plenty of room. And they get there, and there is no in room, and so she's not happy. And she finally starts to get the baby to sleep, and three bearded guys show up on camels, saying that they were told to come and see her baby. And so that finally they leave, and Joseph goes out to the campfire with some of the off-duty shepherds because he's in the doghouse. And she sits down in the hay, and a little kid shows up and wants to play the drum for the sleeping baby. I said, no, let's do. Can we
Of
do
all the
this?
instruments, right? Of all the instruments, not a
All
violin.
the instruments. And the thing is, I used to play the drum and for many years, and I enjoyed it. I loved the syncopation. It was mostly in a marching band, but also in symphony concert bands. And when my parents would have guests over, they would sometimes say, "Oh, play something for them," and I would say, "What would you like me to play for them on the drums? Moon River?" I mean, what are you going to play on the drums?
Take
That would
5.
be a recognizable song. You do the brushes. You can't do it.
No,
Uh,
no,
anyway,
no.
anyway, so I tried to have some fun with my hate for that song,
Well, you
which
can,
isn't
yeah.
that old. Isn't that old? It was 1941.
Drummer Boy was it that
Uh,
old?
uh, Little Drummer Boy, yeah,
Oh, I didn't
1941.
realize it went all the way back to 1941. I thought it was something
Yeah,
out of the
and then
60s.
47 was the fun one. That's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That was Gene Autry.
Autry,
It was
the old
yeah,
cowboy.
the old cow was singing cowboy, and I actually saw him on his tour in the Cleveland Arena, and he had Champion with him, and he asked Champion, how much is 2 and 2? And Champ banged his foot 4 times. And what a brilliant horse. I mean, really, it was great. I never got into Roy Rogers so much, although Sky King, he had an airplane, so that was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
Audrey had a baseball team. It was even better. Too bad they didn't win anything while he was alive, but
yeah,
it was pretty cool.
yeah.
All
He's a
right,
good guy.
we got to wrap this up here pretty quick. Also, don't forget to check out Andrew's VIP column, Struggling to Reject Despair in the Season of Hope. He wrote this right after he wrote the thing about hating Little Drummer Boy. I'm not sure.
That's true.
I'm not sure what that says.
This total despair. I didn't hear the song, but I would have been if I had heard the song.
I think it's because you listened to Last Christmas.
Yeah.
You gotta
Well, I have
reject.
to say, I
Struggling to
do like
reject.
Mariah Carey. I like that one.
I
Yeah,
do
did you
too. I
know
think it's
there's
lovely.
two videos of it?
Oh, I didn't know
They're
that.
on YouTube. Yeah, there's one where she's just a little girl, not a little girl, but a young
Young, very
girl,
young. Yeah.
doing it, and it's kind of a simple, old-fashioned video where she's rolling down the hill in the snow, and I don't know. But and then there's the fancy one where she's in the window of the store and the little girl sees her. So that's the one I like. Anyway, Ed, I
Well,
promise I won't play Last Christmas for you.
I promise I won't play Little Drummer Boy for you. So thank you very much. This is sort of like a mutually assured destruction agreement here, so that we don't
That's
do that.
right. That's
We do
right.
have to get to jokes of the week. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've.
I got a couple here. Uh, this is a true story. I was at the convention where I actually met you in 2008 in St. Paul at the Republican convention, and there was a speech. I don't remember whether it was Sarah Palin's or somebody's. Anyway, I was heading into the men's room, and Alan Simpson was right next to me. Remember him?
Oh yeah, Alan Simpson. Yes, I
Oh
remember
yeah,
him.
yeah. I mean, he was what a breath of fresh air. We were walking into the men's room, and he looked down at me and he said, "He's a big, tall guy." He looked down at me and he said, "Oh, I thought it'd never end." And he stepped up to the urinal. he was in a hurry. Um, So, okay, so Jay Leno, these are old. Jay Leno says these winter storms have left thousands without electricity. It's as if President Obama took over the power companies. And let's see. Oh, and what made me think of it was the Alan Simpson joke. It was a quote. It's a true quote from Wyoming Senator Alan Simpson. He said, "Those who take the high road of humility in Washington, D.C. are not bothered by heavy traffic." And I got one other one.
Okay.
Seth Meyers. He says an Italian winery is releasing 5 limited edition bottles of a Hello Kitty themed wine for the holidays. It's the perfect gift for your alcoholic niece.
Probably selling out to this day, actually. So yeah. All right, I got one for you. A preacher goes to visit an elderly woman of his congregation. He sits on her couch and he notices that there's a large bowl of peanuts on the coffee table. He says, "Mind if I have a few?" And she says, "No, no, go right ahead." So they sit and chat for an hour or so, keeping her company and having a nice conversation. And he gets up to leave and he realizes he's eaten almost all the peanuts out of the bowl. And he says, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry about that. I really only meant to have a few." And she goes, "Oh, that's all right. Ever since I lost my teeth, all I can do is suck the chocolate off of them."
Oh, oh, oh,
Yeah,
that's disgusting. That get
yeah.
me off of chocolate covered peanuts.
That would do it for me too. All right, one last one here. And this is a
Yeah.
good one. This is not necessarily in this season, but this is still a good one. Guy walks into a post office one day and he sees this middle-aged balding guy standing at the counter methodically placing love stamps, on bright pink envelopes with hearts all over them. He then takes out a perfume bottle and starts spraying scent all over them. So the guy's curiosity gets the better of him. He goes up to the balding man and says, "What is he doing? What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm sending out 1,000 Valentine cards signed Guess Who." Guy says, "Why would you do that?" He says, "I'm a divorce lawyer."
Chinning up business.
Have a happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Guess who?
I have a this is a true story. I wrote about the New York Public Library one time and I interviewed the it's not a receptionist, but the woman at the desk that you ask questions about. This is the one on 42nd Street and 5th, I think it is. And so I talked to her, and this is true. And I said, "Well, what kind of questions you asked?" And she told me a whole bunch of them. And said, "What that a woman had come in and asked her where she would find Napoleon's love letters to was
Josephine?
it Marie? Huh?
Josephine.
Josephine, yeah, the Napoleon's love letters to Josephine." And so the receptionist directed her to the book. And a couple days later, a man came in and said, "Where would he find Napoleon's love letters to Josephine?" And she said, "Well, that's funny. We just had a woman here." He said, "Oh, that's my girlfriend. She left me a message in it." What in the world? You know, they had phones in those days.
Well, apparently, maybe they were not necessarily free to use phones. If you know,
Yeah.
maybe
Oh, if you know what you mean. Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean.
Exactly.
Wink, wink, nudge,
Okay.
nudge. Well,
Well,
on that note, while we're celebrating infidelity and all that kind of stuff, by the way, folks, don't give in to despair, and let's tell a few more jokes about infidelity while we're at it.
yeah. Right.
Well, we'll be back
Exactly.
next week. I think we'll be back next week
Yeah.
to do
And then we'll take off the Christmas day.
take off.
Yeah.
We'll take off for Christmas, but so we'll get in a few more shots at Christmas. I think in next week's episode. But in the meantime, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, the President of Pouncing, Andrew Malcolm at
Oh, yeah.
AH.
What a memory.
Don't never suggest a title. It will never leave you for the rest of your
That's right. That's right.
life. And I, of course, am the Swami of season. We will be back next week. Thank you so much, Andrew, for another great podcast.
See ya. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody.